Bushcraft, as we've been talking about, is such a wide subject. Forest
Yeah,
school, you start getting into forest bathing, all of it, and you clearly, I can see that you've spent a lot of time building a skill set over in many different ways. But at the same time, you're also a father of, is it two girls?
yeah.
Yeah, you're running. You basically got two different jobs and volunteering as a scout leader and everything else. How do you work in that kind of skills development, kind of pushing your skills further?
Um, the honest answer is it's about living it. So kind of I'd say never waste an opportunity to learn something from what you're doing. So um, to kind of use kind of it is a bit of a slight at schools, but it's more of a pays a bit of reverence to scouting in that I always say I learned more in scouting than I did at school. Scouting probably got me my first job in that it taught me skills that so it taught me about being observant, time management. Um, so my first job, I apprenticed on the canals as an engineer. So part of that was I took very quickly to rope work. So you have to moor boats up and things like that, and you have to know rope skills. Well, I already had those through scouting, so it's kind of um, when people say, "Can you moor a boat up?" and you go, "Yeah, I can tie a knot. I can tie a piece of rope off, or I can splice something." It's a skill that's already there, and scouting taught me to be observant. It taught me to watch what's going on. So, I mean, for example, this weekend, I took my kids out on their scooters and we went around the local park. Now, the thing is, I am watching what my kids are doing, but I'm also looking at I'm looking at the trees around me. I'm looking at trees that have been wind blown. I'm looking at the next tree that's going to be wind blown. I'm looking at the leaves that are starting to come out on the trees. I'm looking at um, is the are there any bird signs that might be about? Is there any spotting anything obvious in the local dog that's been walking around there? And it's things like that that um, you don't if you just constantly on the lookout for, I suppose, an open to taking in information. You know, you um, I'm trying to think where I was driving back from now. I was driving back from somewhere and I spotted on a lamppost above me there was a kestrel, and it was just going, well, that bird doesn't look like a pigeon. That bird's not it's not the right profile. A pigeon is quite a short, fat bird in a way, whereas a kestrel sits taller. It's a lot more sleek. It's got that predator profile to it. It's designed to be fast, aerodynamic, highly maneuverable, but it's also designed to sit taller and kind of be able to observe and look out for prey that's going to be around it. And that's
It's all that pattern recognition we were
yeah,
talking about earlier. I mean, I've become really good at spotting birds of prey as I'm driving because
yeah,
you just notice it, the whole characteristic of flight and everything.
yeah,
It doesn't fly. It doesn't. The silhouette just it doesn't say um, omnivore, herbivore to me. It says, yeah,
yeah.
it's a
You
predator.
know, it's explaining to, and again, it's that thing of explaining to young people, you know, why for example, why we have eyes at the front of our face, whereas a rabbit or a deer has eyes at the side of the face. Well, we are effectively, although we are omnivorous, we are designed to be a predator. In essence, we have canines. We um, we have, but not, we have effectively, what do you call it? Bifocal vision. So we can effectively judge distance by sight. Whereas, you know, rabbits, deer, things like that they have eyes on the side of the head, because for them, being able to judge distance isn't a priority. They need a wider field of vision. They need to see virtually all the way around, because we are going to chase something. We need to be able to judge, are we close enough to start the chase? They need to judge, is that thing over there to chase me? And they need to, and effectively, the next best thing to having eyes in the back of your head is having eyes on the side of your head, because that way they get sort of almost a sort of 200 to 270-degree angle of vision, where they can see what's going on around them. And it's the same as going back to sort of looking at kestrels and hawks and things like that. Their eyes are quite close to being in the front of their head, whereas a pigeon, it's the eyes are virtually on the side of its head, because, you know, that kestrel needs to judge speed, distance, all the things that make up a chase, you know, or if it's going to sort of dive into whatever it's trying to get, it needs to be able to judge that distance, how far and how fast it's going to have to go. Whereas a pigeon just needs to know, well, there's a kestrel stood over my left shoulder. I need to know it's there, because do I need to run? And it's kind of that observation. And like I say, it's spotting the profiles of different animals, different plants, different trees.
It's
I did a
all about those systems. I mean, you can tell one of my favorite things to do when I start talking to people about tree IDs, okay, have a look at that tree in the distance. It has a certain type of growth. If you look at the way a willow grows compared to an oak, the oak is going to grow slowly. The segments between the branches are very small. And so it has a certain characteristic look. And then you go, willow is growing. And you don't even need to label them. You can just say, that tree is slow growing, that tree is fast growing. And that will give you an idea of the properties of the wood. And you start building those systems systems that you can take across the world. I mean, that whole predator herbivore thing, you can go to the other side of the world, recognize no animals whatsoever, and you can pretty much go, I reckon that's a herbivore.
Yeah, you know, you can. Yeah, it's the thing of, you know, you could, you know, pretty much as just through learned knowledge, the first person who encountered a tiger kind of went, yeah, that thing's going to eat me. Whereas, you know, they probably looked at something like the first deer that they saw, or the first camel or whatever, and went, yeah, that thing probably not going to eat me, because it doesn't match it doesn't match the right characteristics for identifying predator animals and prey animals. And, you know, it's like you say about trees, you know, and as well, it then extends to, you know, we can then teach about, well, why does an oak grow where it grows, whereas why does a willow grow where it grows? You know, a willow needs to be a fast growing tree, because if it doesn't put its roots down fast, the riverbank's not going to be there that long, because water erodes things fast. Whereas an oak tree goes, well, I'm sat in the middle of a wood. I've got all the time in the world to grow. You know, this wood looked like this wood several thousand years ago. And so I'm pretty, you know, an oak, you very rarely find oak trees growing on riverbanks, because they're not quick enough to stop the riverbank moving. Whereas a willow tree generally doesn't grow in the middle of a wood, because it goes, well, actually, you know, I need a lot of water to grow, because I'm very, very quick growing. And so I need to be near water, you know, and that's the thing and it's almost, so you can teach about, you know, it also helps you identify the landscape from the tree, but the tree from the landscape. And you can as well, if you are helping with the conservation side, but you know that you're not going to plant oak trees down the side of a river per se, because that river's not going to be there long enough. Rivers move very quickly. I mean, they've got pictures of when the first planes flew over the Amazon versus now, and it's kind of, they go, well, we're in the exact same spot as where we were, yet the whole river's moved 100 yards that way. And it's kind of because of the path of water, and it's so it's that element of we can go, well, we won't plant the oak trees next to the river, we'll plant them over in the middle of the wood, but we'll put the willow over there because we know that those trees are going to thrive in that environment. And it's about it's the element as well about learning about the characteristics of what we're doing and developing, taking that book knowledge so we can put it all down in a book or a journal. And it's a great, and it's how we've learned about the whole world around us in essence is through books and journals. The first people put down on cave paintings that the saber-toothed tiger was a scary thing that was going to get you, and then the next generation from that cave painting knew, and then we learned about books and writing things down in books. But people out there also then learned about what we were going to do. Once we'd taken that book knowledge, they also then learned, well, someone's drawn a picture of that plant or that mushroom and gone, scary, not, you don't want to eat it. But I don't know about this plant over here. But I know it shares enough characteristics with that plant that it's probably not a good idea to eat it. Whereas I've got this other plant that we've been eating for generations, and I found another new plant, and they look very similar. This thing that we know as an apple, well, it's green, but I've got something over here that looks like an apple, but it's red. So is it enough that I could take a gamble, take a risk on eating it, and experiment and find out? And actually, we found out that actually we've got red and green apples, just by that thing of using the characteristic. I think that's a lovely part of what we do as practitioners as well, is we explain that knowledge very well, I think, as practitioners, in that we learn that rather than trying to identify the tree, we identify what is the tree, and what makes the tree what it is. Because, we can, the amount of, if we're on a survival course, does it matter if we're trying to find something that we want, some resin, for example? Does it matter if we find a conifer tree or a pine tree or a spruce tree or a larch, or does it matter which one we find, so long as we find resin? But we know that if we find a needle tree, we've got a chance that we can find resin there. We know kind of what the ring structure of that tree is going to be like. We know what the strength profile of that tree is going to be roughly like. We know it's going to be a weaker wood, but it's going to be a lighter wood, so it's good for moving with. But maybe if we're going to build roof beams that last 100 years, maybe not the best one. But then we look at them, but then we know about the way an oak tree or a beech tree or something like that grows and goes. It's a heavy wood, but it's a very strong wood. And we know that, for example, willow and hazel and ash, we know that they grow quite fast. And we know that growing quite fast means that it makes you quite a flexible wood. So for something like a bow, or if we're building a curved shelter, we know that they're the kind of woods we want to go for, because they're going to be quite supple and malleable. And it's understanding that, and so in essence, when I've been asked to do survival courses and things like that for scouts, it's about, well, I'm not actually bothered about whether it's an oak tree, a beech tree, or any other tree in that bracket, so long as I find a tree in that bracket. Spruce trees, I'm not really bothered if it's, so long as it's a type of coniferous tree, I can get it to do the job. Now, as a practitioner, it's nice where I can go, yes, but I can identify specifically what tree it is. But when you're teaching somebody a spur of the moment thing, it's like, boom, we want resin. We're going to get it from one of this bracket of trees. And this is how we're going to identify it. And actually, this is also all the other things. It's like, and yeah, that's another bit of, and it's about, but the thing is, that's a great way of teaching yourself knowledge when you go out there, is to say, well, I'm not looking for an oak tree. I'm looking for a tree that has oak tree characteristics. And you then go, well, actually, I've found a tree. So the wood near me that I go to quite a lot doesn't have any oak trees that I've found so far. No, so it has one. I found one oak tree, but it has a lot of horse chestnut. But if I was to give people 5 descriptors for an oak tree, they would probably find the horse chestnut tree first and say, well, it's what you've told me to look for is this tree. But characteristically, they have very similar patterns. They grow very similarly. They have horse chestnut slightly shorter lifespan than an oak, but not too far off. They grow the same way. The bark will come out sort of with similarities, and but then if you look at the leaf patterns, very different leaves, but in winter they look very similar. If you're looking for something for a firewood source, chestnut doesn't burn as hot as oak, but it burns quite hot. It's quite a long, slow burning wood. It makes a nice ember for cooking on. And so people they go down, you could say, so it's, if you're looking for, but then it triggers people to go, so it's not an oak tree, but what is it? And why do I remember it's, different species of oak? Why do, what is your mental trigger to tell you when it's a sessile oak and a peduncular oak? There's those things that people, they build up their own little rhymes, stories, and folklore as well. I mean, folklore is a great way of teaching. I love telling stories, and telling stories around trees helps people understand why trees are the way they are. A great one is the difference between an elm tree and a wych elm tree is a wych elm tree has horned leaves. And so it's almost, people associate witches with the devil, and it has those little devil horns on the side of the leaves, and people and saying, well, if that's a way of remembering a wych elm from an elm, it's a great little thing, and it's about, and so I suppose that thing of how do I fit everything in, it's the fact that I'm not going out there to learn about trees. I'm going out there for a walk, but I pick something up when I go out there, and it's about learning via osmosis. It's about going out there and being open to, oh, I've not seen that bird around here before. Or, I mean, this morning I was speaking to my wife and she was like, oh, there's a bird on the feeder outside the window. It's like a blue and yellow one. And it's like, well, okay, so me knowing that, I'm going, well, and actually I went, oh, she went, I can see it and it's got like a white crest. And I went, right, okay, so, but then like blue tit's got, it's got it's blue and yellow primarily, but it's got a white crest on it, like down the side of its face. And I went, so it could have been a coal tit because they have a white stripe, or it could have been a blue tit. And looking at it, I'm going, oh, that's a blue tit because you can see the little patches of yellow and blue on it. She went, oh, right, yeah, cool. So it's little things like that where, using the characteristics and learning something like that, by going, well, if I know all the birds that have got a white crest or a white stripe on them, I can, that might be the feature that you remember, and you go, but if I remember nothing else, I can go back and look in my books and go, wow, I've gained that bit of knowledge now. I know that what that bird I saw out there today was, and it's that thing of, so go, you know,
Yeah.
like I said, like we were saying, you're driving along and you see a bird on a lamppost and you go, I know what that is now because I remember the characteristics.
Yeah, it's almost like you start off going back to learning the way young children do, where you just
Yeah,
approach everything with curiosity, interest, and engagement,
yeah,
and then you bring in the adult side of you afterwards, and you kind of take it apart. Do I recognize it? Where can I draw parallels to my knowledge, and where can I bring everything together? Yeah, that's fantastic way to approach it, and a way just to get out and do things. And the knowledge will come if you're open to it. Nature is the teacher, as we say.